More than just business news, we're news for business people.
Aayush, we're not in the middle of nowhere. It looks like a forest clearly, but we're not outside Mumbai. We're in fact in Mumbai.
We're in the heart of Mumbai, Alex, and this is what Mumbaikars fondly call the green lungs of the city. It's perhaps the only reason why we breathe relatively clean air.
Better than maybe people up north.
Absolutely. And also, well, this is the source of at least 2 of the major 6 lakes that actually feed water to all of us Mumbaikars.
But why are we talking about this? We're in fact talking about this because there are concerns being raised by environmentalists, by conservationists, about the fact that several infrastructural projects and several issues of encroachment are threatening these green lungs. And we could actually face a situation where in a few decades, these green lungs might just cease to exist.
Yes, and of course, if these infrastructure projects are given the nod without, well, considering some of the things Alex mentioned, it's not just conservationists and biologists and environmentalists that should be worried. Well, you and I, as citizens of the city, should be worried too.
And it gains, I think, more importance because if you remember, Aayush, just a short while back, there was a huge issue that was created, or rather, huge protests that were made about the RA colony development. There was a metro car shed that was being constructed. A lot of people joined hands and protested that, but we actually saw it on the way here.
Absolutely.
And we saw it actually is coming up. But to speak about all of this, and a lot more, of course, we're joined by 2 gentlemen. On the right, we have Stalin Dayanand, who is a conservationist, and he also heads an NGO that's been campaigning very strongly against the development within, in fact, the Sanjay Gandhi National Park.
And since we have 2 people asking questions, we have 2 people giving us answers as well. We also have Anish Anderia. He's also a conservationist and a biologist, and he heads the Wildlife Conservation Trust. Anish, thanks so much for joining us on BloombergQuint. Stalin, Alex and I were just talking about it. This is what everyone calls the green lungs of the city. And, you know, some of these concerns don't seem to be brought up that often when it comes to all of us leading our, busy lives in the city of Mumbai. But if these are taken away, this could lead to a lot of issues for all of us.
Yes, what you said is perfectly right. Like I said, these places are important primarily because of the air we breathe. Air is the primary requirement for every life form to survive, and we have given that the least priority in our lives. We are ready to cough and wheeze our way through the life in the city, but not ready to protect the green spaces that give you clean air. If you come into RA, you will know that this is the oxygen cylinder for Mumbai. And because of this, you get pure air, and whatever temperature control is happening in Mumbai today is because of these forests of RA, which have about 5 lakh trees in it, and many types of wildlife which thrive inside it.
Right.
So it's important for people to realize that this area is essential for their own health and well-being, and not being seen as a land bank for some kind of constructions to come up.
But I want to understand the topography of this place. And we were speaking just before we started this show. You were explaining to us how it's all one area. We might talk about RA as a separate issue, and we might talk about Sanjay Gandhi National Park as one separate issue, but it's essentially all one forest belt in Mumbai. Can you explain it to us very quickly?
If you look around you, and if you, just like we showed you, the forests are contiguous with the national park. It's the same hillock which runs down, the same forest, the same trees. Every kind of species that you find inside the national park, you will find inside RA also. And the forests are no different from the forests of national park. It is just that encroachments have been allowed deliberately to come in and somehow managed to cut off RA from the national park.
So if you're talking about encroachments, not necessarily.
No, and absolutely. And Salim, when you mentioned that, and also considering this is maximum city, and we've seen how we've seen how high rises have come up all across the city. And if you could join me here, because we're in this spot, and while there's dense foliage all around us, there's also a concrete jungle on that side.
Exactly.
And it's, in fact, that's where the national park is as well.
Yes.
The hill over there,
Yes.
you were saying,
Yes.
in the background over
Yeah.
there is the national park.
I don't know if your camera can zoom in. Actually,
Yeah.
between those buildings is a small wall. That's the wall of the national park.
Okay.
And if you see forests on either side, the township is obviously a misfit in this entire geographical landscape. So I would say that this is, we do not know whether it's an encroachment or whatever, but definitely it's a lack of application of mind to allow this forest to be perforated from all sides.
And also, Stalin, I mean, considering, if we were to just look at it, zooming out, considering the fact that that is a densely populated area as well. There's also Film City on that side. Goregaon, houses a lot of people as well. Alex, it's taken us hours to get in and out of shoots from the Film City area. But that is also a concern, considering the pressure on resources on that side as well.
I completely agree with you. But even today, I would say, having said that, nothing, too much is lost. If you see on the right side, the forests are still contiguous, and all you need to do is to accept this, that this is one forest, this is one landscape. And if that can be done, I think Mumbai will have a lot to gain and profit or benefit from it.
Anish, I want to bring you into this conversation. We're talking about Sanjay Gandhi National Park. We're talking about a few infrastructural projects that, if they go through, could threaten the very life of the park and also our lives. You've been campaigning against it. What are the core issues that we're facing here?
See, first of all, we need to know the value of Sanjay Gandhi National Park. And Sanjay Gandhi National Park is 103 square kilometer national park. A national park, by law, is the best protected land of India. Okay, there are nearly 800 species of flowering plants there. Nearly 300 species of birds. The highest density of leopards on earth is in Sanjay Gandhi National Park. As we talk, there are 41 leopards that are behind us, and they are somewhere breathing the same air that we are breathing. Nearly 40 species of mammals, nearly 50 species of herpetofauna. So that's the value it brings in terms of biodiversity. Obviously, Stalin mentioned the importance of a park like this from the perspective of oxygen. Also, water. We cannot ever undermine the function that Sanjay Gandhi National Park plays, not only in regulating temperature of this part of the city, and every day when I drive down from town, that is Nariman Point towards Goregaon, the moment I cross the Goregaon bridge, there is a dip in temperature at least by 3 to 4 degrees, and people on motorcycles can feel it. I feel it in my car.
But you spoke about the biodiversity, and I want to very quickly ask you that. And as a biologist, you're probably the best person among us to answer that. When they say that by killing the bees, you're killing the world, you're essentially talking about the same thing, right?
Yeah. So when we talk about space, and that Bombay, obviously space is at premium. There are a huge number of people here. We are looking at nearly 20 million people. So people encroach. And most people worry about the trees. But unless you have a biodiverse forest, just standing trees won't help. So there is an umbilical cord between trees and biodiversity. So when we talk of a forest, everybody should imagine that it's a forest with species, and species meaning plants and animals. So the value of the park to the city is not just the air and the water, but the functions it produces, and these are the ecosystem services, as we call. So bees, the termites, these are all organisms that we don't even think about. We talk about leopards, we talk about tigers, we talk about elephants, but these are important organisms that live inside the forest and nowhere else. So the park is providing us with huge number of ecosystem services, okay? And the developmental projects that are coming, if you equate the two, there is no comparison, which means that what we are portraying as the benefit in terms of economics by taking some part of this park or destroying that part of park, the negative impact of that on the ecosystem services, which is invaluable. We are looking at trillions of dollars of ecosystem services provided by a park of about 100 square kilometers. So you can imagine that when a developmental project comes and people say, okay, it doesn't matter, it's really going to give profits, the profit is infinitesimally small than what this park is giving. The only difference is that it's non-tangible.
Yes.
So people generally, debate upon this. Otherwise, in the mind of a conservationist, there is just no debate.
But
So
Anish, that's the point that I want to raise, and I really appreciate both of you joining us. It's a sunny afternoon here in Mumbai. Perhaps yes, we are protected a little bit by the green cover, but it's still very humid out here in Mumbai. But when you talk about those issues, and it's interesting you brought up the economics of it as well, right? But what I want to understand from you as well is, and that's one of the main reasons we're having this conversation, Alex, is because of the number of projects that are being proposed within the park and around the periphery as well. Be it the widening of the highways outside, be it, the tunnels, be it the ropeways, the cable cars. These are perhaps the bigger issues that some publications seem to have brought to light. And we thought Alex and I had to come to, well, the heart of the matter and find out what it is. Are these the key concerns? I'm going to get to Anish with this one as well, but are these the key concerns, these projects that are being proposed within and around the park?
Definitely, because like Anish said, water is our main challenge for the next century or even the next decade. RA is the water catchment area for the Mathew River. At any given point of time, the groundwater levels in RA are high. Tomorrow, if we need water, Mumbai needs water in an emergency, this is the place to look for it, fresh water, pure water. These projects are all aimed at looking at these green spaces, these forests, these ecosystems as land banks, which is a completely misconceived way of looking at things. And gradually each one of it is eating away part of it, and each one is somehow showing it as we are taking only 10%, 2%, 1%, whatever it is. But the cumulative impact of all these projects needs to be assessed properly by the scientific bodies, and then you will realize it's a hopeless trade-off. You can never trade off these forests for what it's giving.
Because it's like what Anish mentioned, right? It's not just about the trees, because you could justify by saying you have 50,000 trees in a forest and you're taking 20,000 from here and replanting it elsewhere. It's about the ecosystem being damaged. And I would think, as citizens of Mumbai, and I'm sure if some of the viewers have seen what has been going on with regard to the construction of the metro, you're going to have to damage the ecosystem significantly to actually dig a tunnel in the national park. So you're talking about significant damage that will happen over the course of the next few years if it gets sanctioned in the first place.
Definitely. It's like I said, it's an absolute no-go. Problem is that the government looks at forests as trees. It's not only about the trees. Trees are just one small component of this.
Right.
Every organism inside a forest is interconnected with the ecosystem. When you take away the ecosystems, you are taking away things which you do not know the value of and which you can never replace. Trees are not paperweights to be moved around. They have a particular significance in the location where they are naturally found. And that is basic science which is lost upon the planning authorities and the executing authorities.
Right.
In fact, I would go a step further and say the government should make public the name of the scientists who are involved in the planning process. And I will tell you, it will be a big zero. There will be no one on that list. The problem is civil engineers decide what needs to be done without taking into concern the environmental issues in it.
Okay, so now that's a point. That's a very strong point that Stalin's making. But Anish, I want to get your view in on that as well, because at the Wildlife Conservation Trust, you guys are a reputed organization, and I'm guessing that the government does consult you guys when a lot of projects are actually given their nods and approvals. For something like this, from your talks with the government or with anyone who's perhaps planning any infrastructure projects here, I'm sure due process is followed in these situations. It's not like we want to raise alarm bells over here. There is due process followed, and all of these things are considered.
Well, yes, there is a State Board of Wildlife, then there is a
Yes.
National Board of Wildlife. Any project that comes within these national parks, sanctuaries, conservation reserves, or community reserves have to go to these. Anything that comes within the eco-sensitive zone. So several parks have large eco-sensitive zones. Bombay being a city, you cannot have such huge eco-sensitive zones because there are buildings right on the walls. But so yes, there are bodies in place, and when a project like this comes, obviously the people, the conservationists who are on that committee will assess these things. So those processes are followed. But my question to the government has always been that why have you declared something as a national park or a sanctuary, which has the highest protection given by law, and then you want to slowly fragment it. So I mean, you are going back on the vision that you saw for the country. So that's one thing. Another, for me, am not just a biologist, I've also studied in Institute of Chemical Technology. I understand the economics of everything, and I do understand that for a big nation like India, development has to happen. Otherwise, we will not have jobs, and there is huge amount of other issues. So let us be practical. However, whenever I am on ever on any committee, what I mention is that if don't mess with your national parks and sanctuaries, those are the birthplace of rivers. I'll give you some very short stats. In India, we have about 775 odd national parks, sanctuaries, community reserves, and so. If you add all of them together, it is 4.9% of India.
Okay.
Okay. Now look at tigers and leopards. And so tigers and leopards live in forests. If you add all those places where tigers are found, 600 rivers are either fed by or are born in those forests.
Okay.
So you understand that a tiger or a leopard or an elephant for a conservationist is not just that animal, it is water. And water, who is the main user of water in a big country like this? It is business, it is people, it is poor people. So unless you safeguard those important walls where water is being generated, you are cutting the tree on which you are standing. And so our problem whenever we are on a committee is to pitch development against this. But for a Sanjay Gandhi National Park, yes, Bombay needs roads, yes, Bombay needs metros, yes, Bombay needs ways of moving rapidly. Leave the park alone. There are ways and technologies allowing you to use those, and you can always do that. So let's not have a negotiation on something which is life-giving, not only for our generation, but for many generations down the line. So that's the main thing. And so even if there are checks and balances, what is important is, as a scientist, you will look at the impact of it today. What we will never be able to understand is what it's going to do when the things go bad.
Yeah.
So that's the worry.
Yeah, I mean, that's a concern. That's why, ecologists, you're talking about conservationists, you're talking about environmentalists, everyone's talking about it. But when it comes down to the law, Stalin, you're actually fighting a few cases in court. What kind of protection does the national park actually have?
The National Park, like Anish said, has the highest level of protection under the Wildlife Protection Act and the Forest Conservation Act. Both of it combined together give a lot of protection to that. Alongside, in 2006, the Honorable Supreme Court had ordered that every national park should have a eco-sensitive zone around it. And the Maharashtra government slept on it instead of submitting a proposal for it. It is only on the last date of submission of proposals in 2013 that a proposal was submitted wherein it was said that RA is part of the eco-sensitive zone of the national park. So today if you ask me what did you get out of fighting for RA, we got this declared as an eco-sensitive zone. And the exemptions were carved out in that eco-sensitive zone for allowing the metro to come in. So that again we have challenged that it cannot happen. Once you've declared it, once you have proposed it, you could not have carved out exemptions because like Anish said, we are already behind the clock in terms of land availability. We don't have that much land available to declare a proper 10-kilometer eco-sensitive zone. But at least 2 to 3 kilometers which is available today in the open areas need to be protected because those are the buffer shock absorbers for the national park. So national park and the eco-sensitive zones are very closely interconnected. And out of the 41 leopards that Anish was saying, there are 8 leopards which live here in RA. Live here, mind you, and they live like house cats, moving around these settlements like everyone.
I mean, in fact, you have these very.
No, actually, that is a concern because a lot of these buildings have their playgrounds and all of them right here. This is what everyone talks about, and we talk about leopards encroaching on their space. Well, maybe we encroach on their space in the first place. But I want to ask you one more thing, Stalin. You're talking about, the cases that you're fighting in court. You're talking about several achievements when it comes to, making this an eco-sensitive zone. What the Supreme Court said. In some, some commentators will say, hey, you know what, this is brilliant judicial activism and someone in their right mind has come out with these particular protections. But as an activist, as a conservationist, doesn't it seem a little frustrating saying, okay, the courts are on your side, the better sense does prevail. But at the end of the day, the government is still considering these projects. And that becomes a little concerning because, like you're saying, carving out exemptions with rules, provisos, all of these become issues.
You're perfectly right. Now, every move of the government is, I would say, and counterproductive because it aims to give incentives to car owners. More and more cars to be bought on the road. Plus creating projects and executing them in a manner that inflicts maximum damage on the environment.
Yeah.
Nobody is against any project, if you ask me. It's a question of how you execute it. Like Anish said, there are ways to do it, but there is a cost to be paid. Like I'll give you a very simple example. If you had to build a tunnel, instead of that tunnel, you could have had an elevated road across Godbandar, which was an express road just for public utility, public transport buses. You are not willing to invest in public transport. And you just want to give more and more benefits to people who come in with more cars.
Right.
Secondly, we talk of development. What kind of constructions are going on in Mumbai today? You have an inventory of 3 lakh unsold houses, and there is no justification for more constructions. So all these constructions are drawing on natural resources.
Yeah.
It's not that it's free. Where's the water coming from for the construction? They are not using seawater. All of them are using groundwater.
Yeah.
So Mumbai's resources, though they may be adequate today, are being exploited to a point where it will be finding it difficult to sustain.
Right.
And that's very serious cause of concern.
Very interesting points brought up by Stalin, Alex, because, the earlier, and I've done a few documentaries surrounding the Sanjay Gandhi National Park and even inside there. And back then, the issues that were being spoken 10, 15 years ago, always about encroachment. One, this awareness is increased, thankfully, by the work that these guys are doing, and also some publications coming up with this. But I don't think it's gotten enough traction. Not everyone, all of us in Mumbai didn't know about it for the longest time, considering this is the gravity of the situation. But Anish, you have a particular view when it comes to some of the development projects that you're talking about. Tunnels, underground, ropeways, is that the way to go? Or a 300 car park, 300...
Surface road through eco-sensitive zones
Yeah.
or through national park and sanctuaries is a no-go.
Okay.
So let's not talk about it. If technology allows us to go underground, then it should be a safe technology. We have to be careful because there are reservoirs inside.
Yeah.
Vihar Lake, Tulsi
Lake.
Lake. So if there is a tunnel coming and if it's close to those lakes, then do we have the scientific prowess to be able to make sure that it's not going to damage the aquifers? So yes, tunnels are the least impactful to a national park for sure. So if something has to happen, and if it's the financial capital of the country, then we should not worry about costs, right? So that's one. And you mentioned about encroachment. The High Court had already given an order that people from the park, several thousand, have to be moved. Now suddenly it is again cooled down. So what has happened is that there are people living inside. Some of them are employed outside. So they go and work outside, but they come and live inside. They have a constant impact. There was always, in fact, the department had to build a wall, the wall that you showed in the beginning, that kind of wall around all the sensitive areas. Now that is also not, so when that doesn't happen, what happens is, it gives people an opportunity to encroach in. So the wall would have at least meant that this is the boundary. But even a boundary wall is not given priority. And there is huge amount of money with the park itself. I'll tell you, this is the most visited national park on this planet.
Yes.
Nearly 13.5 lakh people visit this park every year. And the amount of money generated out of tourism, which goes directly to the national park, is 17.45 crores. So there is huge amount of money. Tadoba Tiger Reserve, Kana Tiger Reserve, comparatively, is making about 6 to 7 crores. So you can understand it's more than double. And if this park eventually goes, this park provides about water to about 4 to 5% of Bombay. However, if this park goes, we are surely going to reach a place where Bombay will have to be evacuated.
But I think the point that you're making when you talk about the number of people that visit and the revenue that is generated by the park is that there can be more done with regard to enforcing its boundaries.
Yes.
And it's not being done right now.
Of course not. And I think I don't look at issues in isolation. We have to look at the cumulative effect. So encroachment, people say that there are poor people living. But if it's a national park, if they're going to have a better life outside, then they should be allowed to go voluntarily. Nobody is forcing anybody, right? Walls, roads, small encroachments, effluents getting into the forests, all those for me is one. The impact of that, and by the way, Bombay was an island city. Now all that has become one.
Yes,
But
yes.
Sanjay Gandhi National Park is becoming an island.
Yes.
And islands, by their nature, the thing sadly is that it gets disconnected with all other forests. And when that happens, extinction is a certainty, because whatever happens, if there is some disease, something, all the populations will drop. And there is a citizen science program where people from Bombay who love the park go and count birds. Now, why birds and animals? These are currencies. By looking at them, we can tell a lot about the forest. So when a Stalin says that this park has to be protected, there is no proof. The proof is given by animals. So these guys who are going and estimating bird populations in the last, they have not even got 200 species. On paper, we are saying there are 300 species in the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, but the species richness has gone down. Now that is a barometer that tells you that something is not right. So when somebody says it's not an activist, so Stalin for me is not an activist. Stalin is a guy who is the voice of the park. He's trying to tell you what the park says, but we don't know how to. So he's just trying to convert that into a language that people understand, whether the birds, the leopards, the water, and the trees have already shown us that we are not doing justice to them.
Yeah.
And we are just trying to voice what they are saying.
So there is need, Aayush, definitely of more awareness, and hopefully this program will go a certain way or distance in educating people that there is a need to protect what we
No,
have.
absolutely. And, you know, and my sincere request to all of you is that our only intention to come down over here and brave the heat was to get you, well, the visuals from here and to understand through Stalin and Anish as well. And they've put it very succinctly as to what the issues are over here. And these issues exist right next to you and me in the heart of the city. In the comment section or wherever you're watching this, please voice your concerns as well. Share this. Put any emoji that you want with it, but do share it and spread the word. And let's see what everyone has to say.
Because at the end of the day, the roads, the infrastructural projects, they're all built for you and me. So if you say that you don't need them and you'd rather have the forest, well, the government will have no choice but to listen.
On that note, thanks so much for tuning in. Guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Stay tuned to BloombergQuint.